So today I was going to talk a little bit about cross-simplifying and how that relates to simplifying with fractions and how that can really make multiplying with fractions go a lot faster. So just to remind us, simplifying, for instance, if I had the fraction 6/8, if I'm simplifying a fraction, I'm basically rewriting it as an equivalent fraction but with smaller numbers. So I'm going to look for common factors. In this case, I could divide both of these by 2, and I would end up with 3/4. Okay, so 6/8 is equivalent to 3/4. 3/4 is the simplified form of 6/8. So we can also use that idea when we're multiplying fractions. So let's say, for example, if I had 6/7 and I was multiplying that by 3/8. Now we know when we're multiplying fractions, we're always going to multiply across. Numerator by numerator, denominator by denominator. So I do 6 times 3 equals 18. 7 times 8 equals 56. Then to simplify, I would think, okay, what can I divide both of those by? In this case, 2 is the largest factor. It's the greatest common factor, and I would get 9/28. Now, if I do something called cross-simplifying, what will happen is I will not have to simplify at the end. Okay? And this is really helpful when you're working with bigger numbers, because it makes it so you don't have to deal with those big numbers at the end. You can just get to working with simpler numbers to start off with. So I can actually cross-simplify using the same problem. What I'll do is I'll have it written down the same, 6/7 times 3/8. But I'm going to look for ways that I can simplify. So I know I can't simplify this fraction. And I know I can't simplify this fraction. But since I'm going to be multiplying across, I can almost imagine that 6 is going to be on top of the 8. And I can think, what's a common factor that I have of those two numbers? In this case, I could divide both of those by 2. So you notice it's actually similar to what I would pull out at the end. And usually the way we write this is we would just cross out the number and say, okay, I'm dividing that by 2. That'll give me 4. Divide this by 2. That'll give me 3. So now I looked at those two fractions. I said I can divide them both by 2. I crossed out and rewrote what would happen if I did that. Now you have to make sure you do that to both the numerator and the denominator. And then I'm simply going to multiply across. So now I have 3 times 3 equals 9. 7 times 4 equals 28. And I get 9/28. The same thing as I had up here. But this time I cross-simplified, so I don't have to do any simplifying at the end. If you cross-simplify correctly, you will not ever have to do simplifying at the end. The only case would be is if you end up with an improper fraction, you have to turn it into a mixed number. So let's do an example of like a bigger one. So if you had 24/25 and you are multiplying that by 15/48. Now we might be able to look at this and say, oh, I could actually divide 15 and 48 by 3. But let's say you didn't notice that. And it's time to multiply these numbers. Now these are big numbers. Your simplifying at the end would take a long time. But I can look at these and I can look across, making diagonal, and I can say 24 and 48. Well, those are both divisible by 24. So I could divide this by 24 and get 2, divide this by 24 and get 1. Now I'm working with much smaller numbers. I'm going to work both ways. I can look at the other diagonal pair. I have 15 and 25. Both of those are divisible by 5 is a common factor. 15 divided by 5 gives me 3. 25 divided by 5 gives me 5. Now I just have to multiply 1 times 3 equals 3. 5 times 2 equals 10. So notice a lot easier than working with the big numbers that we would get if we had multiplied 24 by 15 and 25 by 48. We can also do this when we are, actually one more example, if we were multiplying with mixed numbers. So let's say I had 2 and 2/3 and I was going to multiply by 3/16. Right? I have to first make my mixed number into an improper fraction. So it's the first step when you're multiplying fractions. So I'd multiply the whole number by the denominator and then add that to the numerator, because each whole number is worth 3 pieces and I have 2 whole numbers. So I have 2 times 3 is 6, 7, 8. So I would rewrite this as 8 thirds times 3 sixteenths. And I can cross simplify. I can just look at the diagonals. I mean, 3 and a 3. I could divide this by 3 and this by 3, and I'm going to get 1 and 1. I could divide both of those by 8. This divided by 8 is 1, this divided by 8 is 2. And then I can multiply across, and I'll get 1/2. So again, you can see that we have to do very little in terms of simplifying at the end or working with big numbers if we cross simplify before we multiply. This will be a very useful thing to do when we are multiplying fractions.